So welcome to the Man Uprising podcast. I'm Dr. Baruch Levy, also known as B. Now, some of you have been with me through the Defiance Spirit podcast, and that's still a thing. That's my work around the Enneagrams. Some have been with me, Man Search for Meaning, and the Meaning Academy with my friend Dr. Daniel Franz, and our work around Viktor Frankl. And although that podcast is not a thing, that work is still continues, and I really bring that into my work here with Man Uprising. Man Uprising, as advertising says behind me, men rising up in the second half of life, is just that. It's for men rising up in the second half of life, but it's not just for men. It's for the women married to those men. It's for women raising a man. It's for women whose father's a man or have brothers or people in their lives, and they want them to rise up in the second half of life. And it's not just for men in the second half of life, however you define that. It's also for younger men, really for 20 and up, rising up into the second half of life. So might have to change the tagline. But the bottom line is men need to rise up in the second half of life. Now, somebody said to me a while back, uprising, that's so aggressive. It is aggressive. You got to be aggressive if you're going to rise up against your nature. It's not rising up against society or women or anything outside of ourselves. It's us rising up against our nature. And if you don't think a man has to be aggressive, intense, focused, and committed to rising up against his nature, then you don't know men. Men have a destructive side like women don't understand. They don't have it. Of course they can have it. But by and large, I've counseled thousands of people, and the people who do the most explicit destruction in this world, really, do we have to prove this to you, are men. Look at incarceration rates, look at crime, violence, etc. Men need to approach rising up against their nature with that level of intensity. And that's what this is about. This is about rising up against our nature, because our nature it's not good, it's not bad. Nature is amoral, right? Think about nature out in the world. It's not good or bad. It's amoral. It's doing what it needs to do, but that doesn't make you good, right? Just because you're natural. Our work as human beings in general is to become supernatural. Super means to go beyond our nature, right? If anybody who's raised kids knows, you don't want them to be natural. You want them to say thank you. To not say thank you is natural as a kid. So what do? You say thank you, say thank you, say thank you. We're trying to defy our nature as human beings. Little boys and little girls are not good or bad. They're just amoral. They're natural. Our work here is to rise up above our nature. And as a man, our nature, it's not, again, it serves us for a time and place. But when you get to the second half of life, what Dr. Carl Jung calls the afternoon of life, as Dr. Carl Jung says, what works in the morning fails us in the afternoon. The morning of life, the first half of life, is all about doing. It's about achieving. It's about becoming. It's about externals. It has its place. I want every young person, man or woman, to go out into the world and to make a impact. However, if you keep taking that level of focus into the afternoon of life, it fails you. Doing and achieving and external standards of success, they fail us in the afternoon, certainly by the evening of our lives. I see it time and time again. Relationships that fail are the ones that don't reinvent themselves in the second half of life. You got to go deeper, not wider. You got to go inwards, not outwards. If you want to have a recipe for misery, then keep believing you are the flesh suit. You are your externals, the way you look, the way you present to the world in the second half of life. You can try and defy gravity, you ain't gonna do it. No matter how hard I'd try, this hair was not staying in. So either I can fight it and I can get hair plugs, or I can wear a toupee, or I can whatever, or maybe for you it's wrinkles or whatever it is. You can't fight it forever. And if you do, you're just covering it up. It's a facade. It's not true. It doesn't matter to me because I no longer define myself by the outward standards. I want to look good, but I want to look good within the framework of the afternoon. It's a different set of goals, different set of rules, different set of expectations. And so I embrace it. And I embrace it. Well, first of all, I did a preemptive strike, shaving it off. But more than that, I've embraced it by redefining to me what is sexy, what is beautiful, what is meaningful. And I have gone within. This is a new way of being in the world. That's what it means to rise up against your nature, to rise up as a man in this case, and stop defining ourselves by outward competition, right? Defensiveness and strength, courage as being externals. I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm a challenger. I am the quintessential define myself by tough guy, that image in the first half of life, and it carried over into the second half of life. And what I realized was in the first half of life, it worked. It was sexy. It was attractive. It got me what I wanted. It got me to the top of my profession. In the second half of life, it's not sexy. It's sad. It's not working. It's alienating. It's pushing my wife, my kids, my friends further away. I've had to work very hard, and I'm still working on it, to shed the armor, to realize, that idea, courage, from the word cor, comes from the Latin word heart. Courage is vulnerability. In this half of the life, you want to be courageous, especially as an 8. Learn how to be vulnerable. Learn how to open, not close. To invite in, not push out. It's a whole new way of being in the world. Certainly it is for me, and most men I know love and guide in the second half of life, which brings me to a confession. That's right, I'm going to confess right here in front of millions of listeners. Okay, fine, not millions. But I was challenged by a friend of mine who's an Enneagram 8 as well, a challenger. His name is Chuck. Chuck, you know who you are. Chuck is a friend, he's a brother, he's a client. He's in a Man UPrising peer group. I'll tell you more about those. And he said, B, you need to watch The Golden Bachelorette. I said, Chuck, you're out of your effing mind. I have made fun of my wife Ariella for 20 years watching that crap. I ain't watching it. He said, you need to watch it because it is a case study on men rising up in the second half of life, coming together in a quote-unquote peer group and being vulnerable. Now, if you haven't watched it, and yes, I have watched at least the first 3 or 4 episodes. I don't know if I can make it much longer, but it has been wonderful. Truly, I can't believe I'm saying that. I said to Ariella, I'm sorry for making fun of you. Well, I'm not sorry for making fun of you, but the Golden Bachelorette is different than the Bachelorette. Golden Bachelorette is a woman who's in her 60s, I believe. Most of the men are 60s or 70s who are doing the same thing they did on the Bachelorette, but it's not the same thing. I haven't watched the Bachelorette, but Ariella has told me it's pretty disgusting. And I don't need to watch it because I was it. Maybe not the Bachelorette, but I was in that world for a long time, as probably most of you. Some of you still in it, and that is a different set of rules. That is a competition. That is a zero-sum game. There's a winner, there's a loser. Everybody else is a threat. You become the predator, the competitor. And so it's a different way of being in the world. Not a pretty one, right? But the Golden Bachelorette is totally different. I'm not even interested in watching the love scenes because it's kind of cheesy and weird, but so contrived. But the part that's not contrived are the moments when the men, the 60-something-year-old men, are sitting around on the couch talking about their feelings, about their loneliness, about their losses, about their triumphs, about their tragedies. There's no more, big dick contest. Nobody's vying for the Bachelorette. Yeah, they are, but it's not competition. One of them will find their way to her. Don't ruin it for me. I want to find out for myself. But they're each looking for love and supporting their friend on their journey to finding love in their life. And they're truly supportive. I mean, a couple of them are schmucks. The French dude, I can't stand him. And also the Admiral, Kim, he's just stuck sort of in this competitive mode or hardened shell. But most of them, by and large, they're sweet, and they're looking for a different type of way of being in the world in the second half of life. New rules and new goals and new ways of being in the world. It isn't zero-sum game. Just because so-and-so wins doesn't mean I lose. It means they win, and I get to support them on the journey. And that's the second half of life. And that's rising up against our nature, right? Our nature is to fight and to vie and to compete. But we don't have to live that way. And in the second half of life, we shouldn't live that way. And that brings me to Man Uprising peer groups. We're running peer groups now across Denver and now on virtually online. And it's so beautiful to see men in the second half of life, 40 upwards, coming together with other men to open their hearts. I'm working so hard on it. I want to be like those guys in the Golden Bachelorette. I want to continue to be around my Man Uprising peer group brothers because I don't do vulnerability well. It's so hard for me. I really have to rise up against my nature. My nature as an 8 is the fist, right? It's not the vulnerable side, the palm. I'm scared to share that part of me, to show that part of me. For 1,000 reasons, I have learned or I've been wired to protect myself through being tough, but it's not tough. Courage, core, Latin word, heart. It's a different way of being in the world when you stop thinking that courage is being tough and being fearless, but being honest about our fears and being vulnerable. That's the work of the second half of life. That's the work of a peer group. To sit in a group of 8 other men who support you, who ask you to check your cape at the door, who ask you to come here and be vulnerable, and can hold that space. In our peer groups, we don't fix each other. We don't give advice, we just experience, share. The moment you tell another man what to do or what you think knows best, the vulnerability goes away. And it's no longer a space of sharing, it's a space of comparing. And so in that Man Uprising peer group, what we do is we invite each other in to hold the space, to support each other, to work through our vulnerabilities, our fears in a safe space of other men. It's so important to do this work for men with men. You can't do it in a co-ed space. I'm sorry. I will have this debate until the day I die. I've run men's groups. I've even run a women's group in my capacity as a spiritual guide. But I've run co-ed groups, but I have never seen men be vulnerable, not like this, around other women. Something changes when you introduce the Golden Bachelorette, when you introduce that other, because men start competing, or men start impressing, or men start withholding, and you need, as a man, a peer group of other men. I don't care if you get it in your synagogue, in your minyan, in the prayer group. I don't care if you get it in your church group. I don't care if you get it in your fraternal organization, but you got to get it somewhere. And the only way for men to truly be vulnerable is to do this work in the company of other men. Excuse me. It's one of the big transitions for me. I used to be pockets of vulnerability in the first half of my life with women. I still am with my wife, but before my wife, there was lots of dating, and that's how I learned to be vulnerable, is in dating, but also especially in sex. That was the only way I could be vulnerable. And I associated vulnerability or intimacy with sexuality. And I never thought it could be found outside of that domain. I started to find it in my relationship with my kids to some degree. So there is a vulnerability and an intimacy there, but it's not the same because it's not peer group. And there's a power differential. Now with my wife, I have it, but that's the only place I've had it until my men's groups, my peer groups, where I'm a participant, I'm not leading them. And in that space, I just can't even describe it. It's a new level of intimacy for me as a man. If you want a taste of it, watch The Golden Bachelorette. That's a glimpse into what it looks like into a peer group. And it is such a beautiful thing to be in a relationship in the second half of my life that's not transactional. It's not competitive. It's not anything other than pure validation. Pure, as Dr. Wayne Dyer says, intimacy, to see and to be seen. To be seen for the first time in my life by other men. I can't describe it to you, but it is the closest thing I felt to love outside of my marriage. So for me, it's repairing so much damage around my relationships with other men, particularly my dad, who, as you know, killed himself 18 years ago. And so many other men since. I have a tumultuous relationship with men throughout my life, even in the second half of life, and it's all because of the competitive nature. It's all because of the zero-sum game. It's all because of posturing and defensiveness. And for the first time in my life, in my peer group and helping other Man Uprising peer groups come together, form, and evolve. It is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So I'm going to wrap up there. I'm going to do another podcast at some point on the content of Man Uprising, but this one is really about the need for Man Uprising, men rising up in the second half of life, to do so in peer groups. Watch the Golden Bachelorette as a way to get a taste of, to move into that space, and to invite your husbands or your fathers or your sons or your brothers or your friends to check out Man Uprising. This is the most important thing I've ever done in my life, to bring together other men, to learn how to be vulnerable, to learn how to go deeper, to learn how to find intimacy in this space, in the second half of life. So if it's you or if it's someone you love, encourage them to scan this QR code or go over to manuprising.org and they can find their way to the Man Cave. That is a complimentary space where you can come, you can check out the Man Uprising community, no commitment, no cost, and you can give away content in there. You can get the Man Uprising book. You can meet other guys. You can participate in more and more conversations outside of the peer groups, but you can also learn about more about what it takes to join a virtual or in-person peer group and rise up in the second half of your life.